Did you know Elvis recorded over 700 songs? Ever wonder which hidden gems get overshadowed by his mega hits? While classics like Jailhouse Rock and Suspicious Minds dominate radio airwaves and streaming plumes, the King's massive catalog contains explosive rock numbers that somehow slipped through the cracks of mainstream appreciation. These forgotten rockers reveal a fiercer, more dynamic Elvis than casual fans might recognize. Tracks where his raw energy, vocal power, and the revolutionary spirit that made him a cultural phenomenon shine through without restraint. Let's rediscover these forgotten gems that prove Elvis wasn't just a cultural icon. He was a genuine rock and roll animal with few equals, even by today's standards. Ready to have your perceptions of Elvis challenged and expanded? Number 1. Stranger in My Own Hometown. 1969. Ever heard Elvis sound genuinely angry? This Memphis blues explosion from the famous 1969 American Sound studio sessions captures Elvis in rare form. Recorded during the same productive period that gave us In the Ghetto and Suspicious Minds, this track somehow never received the attention of its session mates. The song finds Elvis returning to his blues roots with a vengeance. His vocal performance builds from controlled intensity to full-throated fury as he tells the tale of returning home only to find himself unrecognized and unwelcome. The autobiographical undertones are unmistakable. After years in Hollywood, making increasingly formulaic movies, Elvis was fighting to reclaim his musical credibility. The backing band featuring the legendary Memphis Boys provides a tight, funky foundation, while Elvis unleashes one of his most passionate performances ever committed to tape. The raw emotion in his voice when he belts, "I'm a stranger in my own hometown," carries all the frustration of a man who conquered the world but somehow lost touch with his origins. What makes this track particularly special is how it captures Elvis in an unguarded moment, seemingly more concerned with emotional expression than commercial potential. The production has a loose jam session quality that allows his natural vocal power to take center stage without the polish that sometimes smooth over his rougher edges on more commercial releases. Music historians note this track as evidence of Elvis's continued relevance and artistic vitality even after his 1950s heyday and his sometimes uneven 1960s output. The song demonstrates his deep connection to rhythm and blues at a time when many questioned whether he could still rock convincingly. The answer, delivered in just under 4 blistering minutes, is a resounding yes. Fans seeking the authentic Elvis beyond the jumpsuit image of his later years find in Stranger in My Own Hometown a performer fully engaged and emotionally present, a man singing not just with his voice, but with his entire being. The fact it never became a hit single only adds to its appeal as a hidden gem for those willing to explore beyond the greatest hits compilations. Number 2. Little Sister, 1961. Did a rock song about romantic interest in a girlfriend's younger sister actually hit the charts in 1961? Elvis made it happen with this rockabilly scorcher that showcased his ability to add dangerous edge to even the most radio-friendly material. Little Sister reached number 5 on the Billboard charts, but has somehow been overshadowed by Elvis' bigger hits from the era. The track features a distinctive driving guitar riff from the legendary Hank Garland that propels the song forward with undeniable urgency, while Elvis delivers a vocal that balances menace and playfulness. The subject matter, pursuing a relationship with a former girlfriend's younger sister, might raise eyebrows today, but Elvis sells it with a winking charm that transforms potentially problematic lyrics into a tale of romantic redemption. When he growls, "Little sister, don't you do what your big sister done?" the implication that he's been wronged somehow justifies his romantic pivot. Producer Steve Scholes captured a remarkably crisp sound for the era, with each instrument clearly defined in the mix. The rhythm section maintains a relentless pulse, while the backing vocals add texture without distracting from Elvis's lead. It's a masterclass in early 1960s rock production that still sounds fresh and immediate today. What makes Little Sister stand out in the vast Elvis catalog is its no-frills approach. There are no orchestral flourishes or heavy production tricks, just a tight band and an engaged Elvis delivering a compact rock and roll statement. The song clocks in at under 2:30, adhering to the "don't bore us, get to the chorus" philosophy that defined early rock and roll. The track found new life when Dwight Yoakam covered it in 1987, introducing it to a new generation. But the original maintains a rockabilly ferocity that even the excellent cover couldn't quite match. Elvis' vocal performance walks a perfect line between control and abandon, demonstrating why even in the post-Army movie era phase of his career, he could still deliver authentic rock and roll when the material called for it. Number 3. Reconsider Baby, 1960. Can a white singer from Mississippi authentically capture the essence of electric blues? Elvis answered that question decisively with Reconsider Baby, a stunning blues performance that many critics consider among his most authentic recordings. This Lowell Fulson cover from Elvis's first post-Army recording session in 1960 says his deep affinity for the blues. The track features a screaming saxophone from Boots Randolph and raw, minimally processed vocals that capture Elvis in a loose, jam-like atmosphere. The result is perhaps the most convincingly bluesy performance of his career. What's remarkable about Reconsider Baby is how comfortably Elvis inhabits this blues idiom. There's nothing forced or affected about his delivery. He navigates the song's emotional terrain with the confidence of someone deeply versed in the tradition. His phrasing, timing, and tonal choices reveal a sophisticated understanding of blues conventions that belies the Elvis stole from black musicians, simplification that sometimes follows him. The recording quality itself contributes to the track's raw appeal. Listeners can hear Elvis moving toward and away from the microphone, creating natural dynamic shifts that give the performance a live-in-the-moment quality, rarely captured in studio recordings of the era. You can almost picture him in the studio, eyes closed, feeling every note. Reconsider Baby got buried as an album track on Elvis Is Back and never received single release, which partly explains its relatively obscure status in the Elvis canon. The song represents a road not taken had Elvis concentrated on blues-oriented material rather than movie soundtracks through much of the 1960s. His artistic legacy might look quite different. Blues purists who might dismiss Elvis often point to this track as evidence of his genuine musical ability and understanding of the form. B.B. King himself praised Elvis's blues sensibilities, and Reconsider Baby demonstrates why such praise was justified. The performance stands as a testament to Elvis's versatility and his ability to transcend racial and genre boundaries at a time when such crossovers were culturally significant. Number 4. Burning Love, 1972. Can a song reach pound 2 on the charts, still be considered forgotten? When it's overshadowed by decades of earlier hits and rarely mentioned among Elvis's defining tracks, perhaps it can. Burning Love represents Elvis's last great rock and roll hit, a blazing return to form released in 1972 when his chart presence had diminished considerably. The track opens with an iconic guitar riff and builds into a driving rock arrangement that gave Elvis his first top 10 hit since 1969's Suspicious Minds. While it's occasionally included in career retrospectives, Burning Love doesn't receive the same cultural recognition as his 1950s and 1960s classics, despite featuring one of his most committed vocal performances from the 1970s. Dennis Linda's composition provided Elvis with material perfectly suited to his strengths. A straightforward rock structure with lyrics that allowed him to build from controlled verses to an explosive chorus. The production by Felton Jarvis captures a full band sound with punchy drums and prominent guitar work that matched contemporary rock trends without sounding desperate to be relevant. What makes Burning Love particularly impressive is the context of its recording. By 1972, Elvis was dealing with increasing health issues and had become somewhat disengaged from recording. Yet when presented with the right material, he could still summon the vocal power and conviction that made him a legend. The song's final chorus, where he repeatedly belts "Hunka Hunka Burning Love" with increasing intensity, showcases his ability to push a performance to climactic heights. Music critics have noted that Burning Love stands as Elvis' most successful attempt to adapt to the 1970s rock landscape without abandoning his essential sound. While other aging 1950s rockers struggled to remain relevant, this track proved Elvis could still deliver contemporary-sounding rock and roll that connected with audiences. The song has enjoyed something of a reappraisal in recent decades, appearing in films like Lilo and Stitch and numerous commercials, but it still doesn't command the same cultural real estate as Heartbreak Hotel or Don't Be Cruel. For many casual fans, it remains a rediscovery, and "I forgot how good this was" moment that proves Elvis' rock and roll credentials extended well beyond his 1950s heyday. Number 5. Baby, Let's Playhouse, 1955. How did a 20-year-old Elvis Presley transform a relatively obscure rhythm and blues number into one of rockabilly's defining moments? This 1955 Sun Richards release captures Elvis at his most unvarnished and instinctively revolutionary. Yet, it's often eclipsed by his later, more commercially successful recordings. Baby, Let's Playhouse was Elvis' fourth single for Sun Records, adapting Arthur Gunter's blues original into something entirely new. The record features the classic early Elvis lineup: Scotty Moore's cutting electric guitar, Bill Black's slapping upright bass, and Elvis's own acoustic rhythm guitar. This stripped-down instrumentation creates the perfect backdrop for a vocal performance that alternates between hiccuping excitement and suggestive swagger. What makes this recording historically significant is how it captures rockabilly being born in real time. Elvis hadn't yet been marketed as the king of rock and roll. He and his bandmates were simply following their instincts, blending country rhythm and blues and pop sensibilities into something that didn't yet have a name. The track's primitive production quality, with its slapback echo and minimal overdubbing, preserves the raw energy of discovery. The lyrics themselves raised eyebrows in 1955, particularly Elvis's altered line, "You may go to college, you may go to school, but I'm still your lover, I ain't no fool." Gunter's original referenced the singer's older age. The seductive delivery gave early critics ammunition for their claims that Elvis represented a dangerous moral influence, accusations that only fueled his popularity among teenagers. While Baby, Let's Playhouse reached pound 5 on the Billboard country charts at the time, it doesn't receive the same recognition as later Sun recordings like Mystery Train or the RCA hits that followed. This relative obscurity makes it a revelation for listeners who know Elvis primarily through his more polished 1960s and 1970s work. Musicians from the Beatles to the White Stripes have acknowledged the track's influence, with Jack White even incorporating its lyrics into his own composition, Fell in Love with a Girl. For rock historians, Baby Let's Playhouse stands as crucial evidence of Elvis' genuine innovation during the formative days of rock and roll, a moment when musical boundaries were being redrawn by a young man who simply couldn't help challenging conventions. Number 6. Guitar Man. 1967. Is it possible one of Elvis's most authentic performances came during his much-maligned movie period? Guitar Man provides compelling evidence that even during his creative low points, Elvis could still deliver when given the right material. Written by Jerry Reed, who also played the distinctive finger-picking guitar on the recording, Guitar Man tells the story of a traveling musician determined to make it in the music industry. The autobiographical parallels to Elvis's own journey from Memphis to stardom are unmistakable, perhaps explaining the conviction in his performance. The production represents a departure from the syrupy arrangements that characterized many of Elvis' 1960s recordings. Reed's guitar work drives the song forward with country-influenced precision, while the backing vocals and horn section add texture without overwhelming the core sound. The result is one of Elvis's most organic-sounding records from an era often criticized for overproduction. What makes Guitar Man particularly significant is how it foreshadowed Elvis' creative resurgence. The song was later featured in his iconic 1968 Comeback Special, where it served as the opening number that announced Elvis's return to form. The studio version maintains its own distinct charm, however, with Elvis delivering the lyrics with a combination of humor and determination that suggests he personally related to the character in the song. Despite its quality, Guitar Man achieved only modest chart success, reaching pound 43 on Billboard's Hot 100. This relative commercial disappointment helps explain its overlooked status, though it has gradually gained appreciation among Elvis enthusiasts who recognize it as a bright spot in an otherwise uneven period of his recording career. The song found new life in 1981, when producer Felton Jarvis created a posthumous remix featuring new backing tracks from many of the original musicians, including Jerry Reed. This version reached pound 1 on the country charts, introducing the song to a new audience and confirming its enduring appeal. Nevertheless, the original 1967 recording remains the definitive version, capturing Elvis engaged with material that spoke to his core identity as a musician. Number 7. Trouble. 1958. Can 2 minutes of music define an entire persona? Elvis accomplished exactly that with Trouble, a brief but explosive track from the 1958 film King Creole that distilled his dangerous appeal into a concise rock and roll statement. Written by Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller, who provided Elvis with many of his most memorable songs, Trouble gave him the opportunity to deliver one of his most menacing performances. The track opens with the now iconic line, "If you're looking for trouble, you came to the right place," setting the tone for a song that embraces the rebellious image that made Elvis controversial and compelling. The production, featuring a driving blues arrangement with prominent guitar and saxophone, perfectly complements Elvis's threatening delivery. His vocal performance balances control and aggression, particularly in the way he punctuates certain phrases with unexpected emphasis. When he declares, "I don't take no orders from no kind of man," the defiance feels entirely authentic rather than merely theatrical. What's particularly noteworthy about Trouble is how it arrived just before Elvis's military service temporarily derailed his career momentum. The recording captures him at the peak of his powers, confident and committed, before the Army, Hollywood, and Colonel Parker's management decisions gradually dulled his creative edge. The song serves as a document of what made Elvis revolutionary. In the first place, his ability to project danger and sexuality through music in a way that simultaneously thrilled and terrified 1950s America. Despite its impact, Trouble was never released as a single during Elvis's lifetime, contributing to its relatively forgotten status compared to his chart hits. The track gained new appreciation when Elvis performed it during his 1968 comeback special, reclaiming some of the edge he had lost during years of increasingly formulaic movie roles. Artists, including Britney Spears and Fine Young Cannibals, have covered Trouble, recognizing its potent combination of threat and charisma. For Elvis, fans seeking the authentic, untamed performer beneath the often sign-tied public image, Trouble remains essential, listening a compact demonstration of why older generations found him genuinely. Number 8. Trying to Get to You, 1956. What happens when you combine gospel intensity with rockabilly energy? Elvis provided the answer with Trying to Get to You, a lesser-known track from his debut RCA album that chances his vocal range and emotional commitment. Originally recorded at Sun Records in 1955, but not released until appearing on his first RCA album, Discover of a Song by the Eagles, a 1950s R&B group, not the 1970s rock band, features one of Elvis's most passionate vocal performances. The arrangement builds from a relatively restrained opening to an increasingly urgent delivery that demonstrates his remarkable ability to convey yearning and determination. The production captures the transitional sound between Elvis's raw Sun Records period and the more polished RCA approach that would follow. Scotty Moore's guitar work remains prominent, while new elements like drummer DJ Fontana add additional power to the performance. The result maintains the spontaneous energy of the Sun recordings while hinting at the more expansive sound Elvis would develop at RCA. What makes Trying to Get to You particularly significant is how it shankes Elvis' gospel influences. His vocal approach, with its dramatic dynamic shifts and emotional crescendos, draws directly from the Southern gospel tradition he absorbed growing up. When he hits the high notes in the song's climactic moments, listeners hear the direct connection between rock and roll and the church music that partly inspired it. Despite never being released as a single, Trying to Get to You became a favorite among serious Elvis fans who recognized its artistic merits. The track gained additional significance when Elvis chose to revisit it during his 1968 comeback special, delivering a performance many critics consider even more powerful than the original recording. This later interpretation, with Elvis seated but fully engaged, perfectly captured the song's emotional intensity. Music historians point to Trying to Get to You as evidence of Elvis's genuine artistry beyond his commercial appeal. The performance displays a musician making choices based on emotional expression rather than commercial calculation, a side of Elvis that casual listeners might miss when focusing solely on his biggest hits. Number 9. Lahi, Miss Claudy, 1956. How do you take an R&B classic and make it your own without losing its essence? Elvis provided a master class in respectful reinterpretation with his electrifying version of Lloyd Price's Lahi, Miss Claudy, recorded during his first RCA session in 1956, but overshadowed by the massive hits that emerged from the same historic recording date. The session that produced Heartbreak Hotel, Blue Suede Shoes, and I Was the One also yielded this barnstorming take on Price's 1952 hit. Elvis brings unbridled enthusiasm to the performance, supported by Scotty Moore's stinging guitar work and a thunderous piano introduction from the legendary Fontana, though some accounts suggest it might have been LeBrace's brother George on piano. What makes Elvis's version remarkable is how he honors the original while injecting his distinctive vocal personality. Rather than smoothing out the R&B edges for a white audience, Elvis leans into the song's rhythmic intensity and emotional directness. His vocal captures the perfect balance between technical control and wild abandonment that characterized his best 1950s work. The recording quality itself contributes to the track's power. The RCA engineers captured a robust, room-filling sound that improved upon the technical limitations of Sun Records while maintaining the vital energy of those earlier sessions. The mix places Elvis's voice front and center while allowing each instrumental element to be clearly heard, a balance that chinks both the singer and his exceptional backing musicians. Despite its obvious quality, Lahi, Miss Claudy became something of a forgotten gem in the Elvis catalog, primarily because it was released as an album track rather than a single at a time when singles dominated the market. The song's relative obscurity makes it a delightful discovery for listeners familiar only with Elvis chart-topping hits from the era. For students of rock and roll history, the track serves as a perfect example of the cultural synthesis that defined early rock and roll. A white artist from Mississippi interpreting an R&B hit written by a black artist from Louisiana, backed by musicians who understood both country and blues traditions, this cross-pollination created something greater than the sum of its parts and helps explain why Elvis became such a cultural figure beyond his personal charisma and talent. Number 10. Such a Night, 1960. Ever wonder what Elvis might have sounded like fronting a jazz-influenced doo-wop group? Such a Night provides a tantalizing glimpse of this alternate musical universe, touting Elvis's versatility and his ability to excel across different styles. Originally recorded by the Drifters in 1953, Elvis transformed the song into a swinging, up-tempo number that highlights his often overlooked ability as a rhythmically sophisticated vocalist. The arrangement features prominent saxophone, playful backing vocals, and a loose after-hours feel that captures Elvis in a light-hearted mood far removed from his more intense rock and roll performances. What makes Such a Night particularly impressive is Elvis' phrasing. Throughout the recording, he plays with timing in a way that demonstrates his deep musical instincts, pushing ahead of the beat and then pulling back to create tension and release. This approach shows the influence of Dean Martin and other crooners Elvis admired while maintaining his distinctive vocal character. The production part of the famous 1960 Elvis Is Back sessions that followed his military service captures a more mature Elvis, exploring his musical options. Producer Steve Scholes and engineer Bill Porter created a warm, intimate sound that placed Elvis's voice in a setting sophisticated enough for adult listeners while maintaining enough energy and personality to satisfy his younger fans. Despite its obvious charm, Such a Night received relatively little attention when released as the B-side to A Mess of Blues in 1960. While the song reached pound 16 on the Billboard Hot 100, it has been overshadowed in Elvis's catalog by bigger hits and more obviously rock-oriented material. For Elvis aficionados, Such a Night represents a road less traveled in his career, a direction that balanced his rock and roll roots with more sophisticated musical approaches. Had Elvis pursued this path more consistently instead of becoming increasingly caught up in movie soundtracks throughout the 1960s, his artistic legacy might look quite different. The track stands as evidence of his considerable musical range and his ability to adapt his voice to different contexts while maintaining his essential identity as a performer. Did any of these forgotten rockers change your perception of Elvis? Which underappreciated Elvis tracks do you think deserve more recognition from music fans today?